Hello and welcome, my friends. Before you close your eyes tonight, let me ask you a gentle question. Why is it that something which happened years ago can still echo inside us as if it just occurred yesterday? Perhaps it was a word spoken in anger, a moment of abandonment, or a loss too heavy to carry. The past, though gone, sometimes clings to us like a shadow, shaping the way we breathe, the way we love, the way we fear. This is why we gather here, not to erase those shadows, but to learn how to live with them more lightly. Healing is not about pretending the wound never existed. It is about acknowledging it, touching it with compassion, and discovering the freedom that emerges when we no longer let yesterday dictate today. In the next chapters, we will walk step by step into this journey of healing past wounds. We will explore why the mind holds on, how the body remembers, and most importantly, how you can slowly reclaim peace within. Together, we'll learn to meet the past without drowning in it, and to live in the present with a softer, steadier heart. But this is not a lecture, it is a conversation. And I would love for you to be a part of it. If at any point tonight something resonates with you, or you feel your own story whispering back, I invite you to share it in the comments. Your words may become the very light someone else needs. And if this journey feels meaningful, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that we can continue exploring these quiet paths of healing strength and peace together. Speaking personally, I've come to realize that healing doesn't mean becoming the same as before. It means becoming someone new, someone who carries scars not as burdens, but as maps of survival. And perhaps that is where true freedom begins. The nature of past wounds rests in their persistence, in the way they silently extend themselves beyond the moment of their occurrence. A wound of the body follows a visible path. It bleeds. It heals, it scars. But wounds of the heart and the mind are far less obedient to time. They may remain invisible to the eye, yet they shape how we stand, how we think, and how we feel. What makes them particularly difficult is that they are not events anymore. They are memories, and memories possess a peculiar quality. They can be recalled, re-experienced, and relived with astonishing intensity. The mind, unlike the body, does not always know the difference between then and now. When we speak of past wounds, we are not merely recounting isolated incidents that happened once and ended. We are acknowledging the inner imprints left behind. These imprints function as silent instructions guiding our responses long after the original moment has vanished. They operate in the background of consciousness, shaping attitudes and inclinations, often without permission. A single phrase, a fleeting silence, or a subtle sensation in the present can awaken these old imprints, making them feel current and alive. In this way, the past inserts itself into the present, and what should have been left behind continues to exert power over who we are becoming. At the heart of every unhealed wound lies unfinished experience. Something that should have moved through us became arrested. A reaction that should have completed itself remained incomplete. Perhaps it was an emotion too large to be felt, a truth too heavy to accept, or a reality too sharp to look at directly. The moment fractured, and we carried its fragments forward. These fragments lodge themselves in the psyche and return again and again till we learn as to turn toward them with attention and courage. Thus, wounds from the past are not preserved by the passage of time, but by the absence of resolution. Another important quality of past wounds is their resistance to logic. Reasoning with them rarely works because wounds are not intellectual constructs. They are residues of lived experience. To tell oneself it is over, I should move on, often proves ineffective because the wound does not exist in the realm of rational decision-making. It exists in the body's memory, in the nervous system's response, in the patterns of thought that arise unbidden. Healing, therefore, cannot be achieved through denial or force. It requires recognition, acceptance, and a willingness to approach what feels uncomfortable. The nature of wounds is also paradoxical. They are both deeply personal and universally human. Each person carries their own unique constellation of memories and scars, yet the fact of being wounded is something shared by all. This paradox offers an insight. While no one can fully know the particular contours of another's pain, there is nevertheless a profound common ground in the experience of being hurt and in the longing for relief. Wounds remind us of our vulnerability, but they also remind us of our shared humanity. It is also worth noting that past wounds alter the lens through which life is viewed. Instead of perceiving reality as it is, one perceives it through the distortion of memory. A person wounded by betrayal may live in suspicion. A person wounded by neglect may interpret silence as rejection. The wound becomes a filter that colors perception. And this filter, left unattended, not only perpetuates suffering, but also restricts freedom. It prevents us from engaging with life freshly, with openness and possibility. Healing is in essence the process of cleaning this lens so that the present moment may be encountered as itself, rather than as a repetition of what has already passed. The persistence of wounds reveals something about the structure of human consciousness. We are not only creatures of the present, but also carriers of the past. This can be a source of pain, but also a source of depth. For to carry memory is to carry story, identity, and meaning. Yet when those memories remain unresolved, they weigh us down instead of enriching us. The task then is not to erase memory, but to transform it. Healing allows us to retain the story without being imprisoned by it, to carry the past as wisdom rather than as burden. Finally, the nature of past wounds suggests that time alone is not sufficient to heal. The old saying that time heals all wounds is only partially true. Time may soften the edges of pain, but it does not resolve what has not been faced. It is attention, not time, that completes the process. Conscious awareness directed gently and consistently toward the places within us that still ache is what allows wounds to lose their hold. Without this, years may pass, and yet the wound remains as raw as the day it was formed. Healing requires presence, and presence is the doorway through which the past can finally find rest. From my perspective, what fascinates me most about past wounds is their subtlety. They are not always loud or dramatic, but rather quiet and persistent, shaping choices without our knowing. I have realized in my own life that the greatest act of healing begins when I stop running from silence. It is in stillness, when I allow myself to listen inwardly, that I notice how much the past tries to speak. Acknowledging this voice is for me the beginning of freedom. The Stoics often reminded us that suffering is not caused by events themselves, but by the judgments we place upon them. Epictetus wrote that we are disturbed not by things, but by our interpretation of things. Past wounds align with this truth. The events are long gone, yet our judgments and attachments continue to wound us. Healing from a Stoic lens is learning to perceive the past without clinging or aversion. By disciplining perception, we loosen the grip of memory and reclaim sovereignty over the present. The past is not only a sequence of events concluded and sealed by the passage of time, it is also an energy that lingers, a subtle continuity that extends itself into the present. What was once experienced as pain or rupture does not dissolve simply because the calendar has turned. Instead, it finds ways to inhabit thought, perception, and reaction. The essence of unhealed wounds lies precisely in this. They transform themselves into invisible patterns that color every subsequent moment. The present, instead of being an open horizon, becomes a repetition of what has already been endured. When the past lives within the present, it reshapes awareness itself. One no longer sees life as it is, but through a filter woven from memory. Sensations, words, and encounters are not perceived in their purity, but are distorted through the residue of what came before. The mind draws connections unconsciously, linking the now with the then, overlaying a fresh moment with the shadow of what was. The wound does not remain confined to its origin. It migrates and expands, occupying spaces it was never meant to reach. In this way, the present becomes less about possibility and more about repetition, less about reality and more about projection. At the root of this phenomenon is the human tendency toward continuity of consciousness. Our minds seek patterns, coherence, and familiarity. When pain remains unresolved, the mind holds onto it as a reference point, a framework through which new experiences are measured. What follows is a circularity. The past is kept alive precisely because the mind insists on using it as a guide. The repetition is not intentional, but it is nonetheless persistent. Thus, the present is subtly rewritten by memory, and the individual becomes less a free agent and more a captive of unfinished experience. This dynamic reveals the danger of unhealed wounds. They consume the freshness of life. Each moment of the present is meant to arrive unburdened, offering a chance to meet existence anew. Yet when the past clings, the present is smothered under its weight. Instead of responding to what is here and now, one reacts as though the past were unfolding again. Reality is replaced by recollection, and choice is replaced by habit. The result is a kind of imprisonment. One is not living in the present, but reliving what has already occurred. The persistence of the past in this manner also influences the inner dialogue. Thoughts become cyclical, revisiting familiar territories without resolution. A phrase, an image, or a sensation can activate a cascade of memories, none of which are consciously invited. This recurrence is not only a matter of mental activity, but also a manifestation of the nervous system. The body itself carries traces of memory, and the present moment becomes infused with the physiology of the past. It is as if the body and the mind are conspiring to replay what has not been completed. To understand this nature of wounds is to recognize why healing is so vital. Without healing, the present cannot fully belong to itself. It is continually interrupted, rewritten, and overshadowed. Healing allows for a separation between memory and presence, permitting the individual to encounter the moment without distortion. To heal is to reclaim the immediacy of life, to make the present once again a space of openness rather than a stage for repetition. It is also important to note that the presence of the past in the present is not always violent or dramatic. Often it manifests subtly as a quiet undertone, shaping mood, attitude, or perspective. It may not shout, but it influences. This subtlety makes it more difficult to notice, yet also more insidious. What is unobserved can guide behavior more strongly than what is acknowledged. To bring the dynamic into awareness is therefore the first movement of healing, to admit that the past is not over, that it still lives here, in this breath, in this thought, in this reaction. The paradox of this situation is that while the past lives in the present, it has no true existence outside memory. The event itself is gone, irretrievable. What remains is its echo. This means that the power of the past is sustained not by the event, but by the mind's continued attachment to it. Thus, the key to release lies not in changing the past, but in transforming the relationship to it. One cannot rewrite what has occurred, but one can cease to allow it to dictate the terms of the present. The work of healing, then, is to let the present breathe in its own air, unpolluted by what has already passed. The intrusion of the past into the present also highlights the fragility of human freedom. To live without awareness is to live in chains, bound by memories and patterns beyond conscious choice. Freedom emerges only when one recognizes the mechanism at work. When the influence of the past is seen clearly, it begins to lose its unconscious grip. With clarity, the present can be reclaimed, and the self can begin to act rather than merely react. Healing thus restores the possibility of choice, and with it the dignity of being fully alive in the now. In my own contemplation, I find the most difficult realization to accept is how much the past still breathes through me. It is not always easy to admit that the present is clouded by memory, but acknowledging this truth has been essential. For me, the act of healing is not about erasing memory, but about loosening its grip on today. Each moment becomes clearer when I allow it to be itself instead of demanding it conform to the echoes of what came before. The Stoics taught that our judgments shape our experience far more than external events. Marcus Aurelius observed that we should not allow the past to dominate the present, for life is always lived in this very moment. Past wounds demonstrate how easily we surrender to memory, mistaking it for reality. The Stoic practice of presence, focusing on what is within our control here and now, is a powerful antidote. By disciplining the mind to remain with the present, one frees oneself from the tyranny of what has already passed. The human psyche possesses an extraordinary ability to conceal pain. When a wound proves too heavy, too raw, or too destabilizing, the instinctive response is often to turn away from it. This turning away may take the form of denial, the outright refusal to acknowledge that something painful occurred, or the insistence that it left no mark. At other times, concealment emerges. The wound is recognized but hidden, placed out of sight, buried beneath layers of distraction or pretense. Both strategies are deeply human. They provide temporary relief, a sense of control over experiences that threaten to overwhelm. Yet their very function to shield us from suffering becomes the mechanism by which suffering is prolonged. Denial is not simply the absence of recognition, it is an active suppression of awareness. The mind erects barriers, blocking access to memory or emotion, as though refusing to look could make the wound vanish. Concealment similarly attempts to control what remains visible, wrapping pain in silence or disguise. Together, these strategies form a shield, but one that does not dissolve the wound. Instead, it pushes it inward, embedding it more deeply into the unconscious layers of being. What is denied or concealed does not die. It waits, quietly shaping thought, behavior, and emotion from beneath the surface. The persistence of concealed wounds can be understood as unfinished energy. When pain is not acknowledged, the process of integration is halted. The body and mind cannot complete their natural response, leaving the wound in a suspended state. This suspension creates tension. Denial and concealment appear to reduce pain, but in reality, they preserve it, freezing the wound in time. Over months or years, the denied experience may harden into a silent structure, forming the background against which life unfolds. It becomes part of identity, not consciously chosen, but unconsciously carried. What makes denial and concealment so deceptive is their apparent effectiveness. On the surface, one may function, appear whole, even succeed. Yet beneath the surface, a fracture remains. The fracture may not be spoken of, but it quietly dictates the boundaries of thought and feeling. Denial, in this sense, is not an absence of pain, but a refusal to let it be seen. Concealment is not a cure, but a disguise. These strategies shield awareness, but simultaneously imprison it, keeping the wound unresolved. The cost of denial is the loss of authenticity. To deny or conceal wounds is to divide oneself. Part of the self knows the truth. Another part insists on silence. This division consumes energy as the psyche must maintain both the concealment and the facade. Over time, the weight of this inner conflict manifests in fatigue, unease, or a vague sense of estrangement from one's own being. Healing becomes impossible under such conditions, for healing requires wholeness, and wholeness cannot coexist with fragmentation. The concealment of wounds also reveals a deeper truth about human vulnerability. To admit pain is to admit limitation, and limitation often feels unsafe. By denying pain, the individual preserves an illusion of control, yet control, built on suppression, is fragile. It must constantly defend itself against the possibility of exposure. The hidden wound becomes a secret that shapes behavior, compelling avoidance, resistance, and pretense. The energy spent in concealment is energy taken away from living fully in the present. In the end, denial and concealment create an inner paradox. The wound is hidden to protect the self, but the act of hiding becomes the source of ongoing harm. The very attempt to escape pain binds the individual to it. What is suppressed remains unresolved. What is concealed remains alive. True liberation arises not from hiding, but from seeing. The wound demands recognition, not erasure. Only when it is faced openly can it begin to lose its grip. This does not mean that denial or concealment are failures. They are strategies of survival responses born of necessity when pain threatens to overwhelm. They are in their own way acts of protection, but they are temporary measures, not final solutions. To remain in denial indefinitely is to prolong suffering. To continue concealing pain is to live divided. Healing requires a shift from turning away to turning toward, from suppression to acceptance, from concealment to expression. The difficulty of this shift lies in fear. To acknowledge pain feels like opening a door to chaos. Yet the paradox of healing is that the chaos is already present, silently shaping life from the shadows. By turning toward it, one does not create new suffering, but begins the process of dissolving what already exists. Denial and concealment protect against recognition, but recognition is the very medicine the wound requires. To deny pain is to preserve it. To reveal it is to begin the path of freedom. In my own reflections, I see how often denial masquerades as strength. It is tempting to believe that by ignoring pain, I rise above it. Yet I have discovered that silence is not strength, but postponement. The true courage lies in allowing myself to see what I would rather not see, to admit the fracture within. For me, healing begins with honesty, an honesty that is not harsh or judgmental, but tender, the kind of honesty that says, "This is here, and it matters." The Stoic tradition teaches the importance of confronting reality as it is not as we wish it to be. Epictetus warned that freedom lies in aligning with truth rather than resisting it. Denial and concealment are forms of resistance, attempts to deny what is beyond our control. The Stoic path encourages the opposite, to accept with clarity what has occurred, to acknowledge it without distortion, and to act from reasoned presence. In this way, the mind is liberated from the exhausting labor of concealment. Wounds do not remain confined to the individual who first experiences them. They carry within them a tendency to travel, to seep silently into relationships, families, and communities. extending their influence far beyond the moment of origin. This transmission across generations is not always deliberate or conscious. Rather, it arises from the way unresolved pain reshapes perception, language, and behavior, imprinting itself on the fabric of human connection. A wound left unattended in one life becomes a subtle inheritance in the life of another. This intergenerational presence of wounds is evidence of how deeply human beings are intertwined. No life is lived in isolation. Thoughts, emotions, and actions ripple outward, touching others in ways unseen. When pain is concealed or denied, it does not vanish. It manifests in the patterns of speech, in the tone of interactions, in the atmosphere of the household. The next generation grows within this atmosphere, absorbing not only explicit lessons, but also the silent undertones of what has not been resolved. In this way, pain unaddressed in one life becomes part of the foundation upon which another builds their own. The mechanism of transmission rests in repetition. When wounds remain unhealed, they shape habits of thought and action that are then modeled often without awareness. Children, partners, or communities internalize these habits, interpreting them as normal, natural, or inevitable. Over time, these patterns harden, becoming less a reflection of one person's experience and more a collective condition. A single moment of pain may therefore echo across decades, its resonance amplified by the silence that surrounds it. The endurance of wounds across generations also reflects the nature of memory itself. Memory is not limited to personal recollection. It can be embedded in culture, language, and collective identity. When wounds are not addressed, they enter these collective channels, forming part of the shared unconscious. They appear not only in what is spoken, but in what is avoided, not only in the stories told, but in the stories left untold. Silence becomes a form of communication, transmitting pain, not by what it says, but by what it emits. Such transmission demonstrates the profound responsibility inherent in healing. To heal is not only to free oneself, but also to interrupt a cycle. It is to prevent pain from flowing forward into lives not yet lived. This is why healing is not a private act alone. It is an act of service, a way of reshaping the legacy one leaves behind. By facing wounds directly, one creates the possibility of a different inheritance. One marked not by silence and repetition, but by awareness and renewal. The generational aspect of wounds also exposes the limits of individualism. It challenges the illusion that pain is wholly personal or self-contained. In truth, each wound touches a web of relationships. Each unresolved memory influences the way we connect the words, we choose the emotions we express or suppress. These influences are then taken up by others who, often without knowing, continue the cycle. Healing therefore requires a recognition that one's inner life has consequences beyond the self. It is a responsibility as much as a choice. One of the more subtle aspects of generational wounds is their invisibility. Because they are transmitted indirectly through behavior and atmosphere, they may not be recognized as wounds at all. They may be mistaken for temperament, personality, or cultural habit. This invisibility makes them difficult to identify and even harder to challenge. Yet once recognized, they reveal a lineage of suffering pointing back to places where pain was left unattended. Awareness of this lineage opens the possibility of change, for what is seen can be addressed, and what is named can begin to loosen its hold. At the same time, the recognition of intergenerational wounds should not be seen as blame. It is not about assigning fault to those who came before. Rather, it is about understanding that pain has a continuity, that it seeks resolution, even if it must travel across lives to find it. Each generation inherits both gifts and burdens. To acknowledge the burdens is not to condemn, but to illuminate the path toward transformation. The task is not to reproach the past, but to take responsibility for the present, ensuring that the legacy moving forward is lighter than the one received. This perspective reframes healing as both personal and collective. On the personal level, it frees the individual from the chains of unconscious repetition. On the collective level, it reshapes the patterns that might otherwise endure indefinitely. Healing becomes a bridge connecting past and future, ensuring that pain does not define the continuity of life. In this sense, healing is not only an act of self-care, but an act of stewardship, a way of caring for those yet to come. The truth revealed here is profound wounds that are unhealed expand beyond their original boundaries. They do not remain still. They seek expression even if that expression arrives in another life. The responsibility that falls upon each of us then is to recognize the continuity and to interrupt it with presence, awareness, and compassion. By facing what has been concealed, one does not only liberate oneself, but begins to alter the inheritance of generations. For me, the idea of generational wounds is both humbling and sobering. It reminds me that my silence or avoidance does not end with me. It ripples outward, shaping lives I may never see. This awareness brings a sense of responsibility that is not heavy, but clarifying. I realize that to heal myself is also to heal a portion of the lineage I come from and to reshape the future I touch. Healing in this light becomes an act of quiet courage that extends far beyond the self. The Stoics emphasize the interconnectedness of human beings, teaching that we are citizens of a larger whole. Marcus Aurelius wrote of the importance of living in harmony with nature and community, recognizing that what harms one part of the whole reverberates throughout it. Generational wounds illustrate this truth. Pain unaddressed in one life continues in others. From a Stoic perspective, healing is an act of aligning with nature's order, facing reality as it is, and breaking cycles of harm so that the community present and future may flourish. The human being is not merely a collection of thoughts on one side and physical tissues on the other. It is a unified whole in which mind and body are intricately interwoven. When a wound from the past remains unresolved, it does not stay confined to memory alone. It inscribes itself into both the mental and the physical landscape. This inseparability explains why unhealed wounds are experienced not only as recollections, but as living conditions that influence the entire being. At the level of the mind, wounds manifest as patterns of thought that circle endlessly, echoing the original pain. These patterns create a kind of mental atmosphere coloring perception with tones of unease or anticipation of harm. The mind, rather than serving as a space of clarity and openness, becomes preoccupied with guarding against repetition of what once occurred. This vigilance, though unconscious, sustains tension. Thoughts are shaped less by present reality and more by the residue of memory, resulting in a diminished ability to engage fully with what is here and now. Such patterns can generate a pervasive sense of fragmentation. The mind feels pulled between past and present, unable to inhabit either fully. Memory intrudes upon the moment, while the present resists the intrusion, leading to conflict within awareness itself. This conflict may remain silent, unnoticed, yet it consumes energy. It creates fatigue, distraction, and a subtle but constant sense of unease. The mind, in trying to shield itself, ends up perpetuating the very wound it seeks to avoid. The body, too, bears the imprint of unresolved wounds. Emotions are not abstractions, but embodied experiences. When pain is suppressed, it does not evaporate. It lodges in the nervous system, the muscles, the rhythms of breath. The body carries the memory as tension, as restlessness, or as disconnection from sensation. In this way, the past infiltrates physiology. The body, like the mind, struggles to distinguish between then and now. Its responses are conditioned by what it has endured, and until healing occurs, those responses persist, shaping posture, energy, and vitality. The effect on the nervous system is particularly significant. Wounds that remain unresolved keep the system in a state of alertness. The body behaves as though danger were ongoing, maintaining heightened vigilance, even in moments of safety. This state is exhausting. It prevents deep rest, interferes with natural rhythms, and erodes resilience. Over time, the body adapts to this heightened state, as though it were normal, yet the cost is profound depletion of energy, reduction of clarity, and erosion of trust in one's own sense of stability. The unity of mind and body ensures that the impact of wounds is cyclical. Mental patterns reinforce physical states, and physical states reinforce mental patterns. A thought of fear produces bodily tension, and bodily tension sustains the thought of fear. This cycle perpetuates itself without conscious intention. It is not the wound itself that maintains the cycle, but the lack of resolution. Until the wound is faced and integrated, the cycle continues, diminishing the vitality of both mind and body. The impact of wounds on mind and body also extends to the experience of identity. When memory shapes perception and physiology, it reshapes the sense of self. One begins to feel defined by the wound, as though it were not an experience, but a permanent feature of existence. The mind repeats narratives of limitation, while the body confirms them through its responses. The self, in turn, becomes smaller, constricted, less open to possibility. Healing, therefore, is not simply the easing of pain, but the restoration of identity to its wholeness. What is striking is the persistence of these effects across time. The mind may consciously forget, yet the body remembers. The body may adapt, yet the mind reactivates. Together, they conspire to preserve the wound until it receives the attention it requires. In this sense, the impact of wounds on mind and body is not arbitrary, but purposeful. It is as though the whole being insists that what is unresolved cannot be ignored. The symptoms are signals guiding awareness back to the place where healing must begin. The consequence of ignoring these signals is a life lived in fragmentation and fatigue. Without integration, the mind cannot rest, and the body cannot fully release. Vitality is consumed by the labor of suppression. Presence is clouded by the constant intrusion of memory. What could be a life of clarity and vitality becomes a life of half engagement, half awareness, half being. The wound unhealed exacts its price continuously, not as punishment, but as unfinished business demanding attention. Thus, the impact of wounds on mind and body is a reminder of the indivisibility of human existence. Mind and body are not separate domains where pain can be compartmentalized. They are one, and what touches one inevitably touches the other. To heal, therefore, is not only to address memory, but to release the body, to soothe the nervous system, to bring coherence back to the whole. Healing is not the erasure of the wound, but the reintegration of self, so that mind and body no longer carry it as an unresolved weight, but as a source of depth and resilience. In reflecting on this connection, I am struck by how inseparable my own mind and body truly are. I once believed that wounds could be confined to thought, but I have since realized they live in posture, in energy, in the rhythm of breath itself. This recognition has taught me to listen more carefully to the signals of my own body and to treat them not as weaknesses, but as invitations. They are reminders that healing requires attention to the whole being, not only the mind. The Stoics emphasized harmony between reason and nature, recognizing that the self is a unified whole. Epictetus taught that disturbances arise not from events, but from our judgments of them. Yet even he acknowledged the embodied reality of those judgments. To live in accordance with nature is to accept that mind and body are inseparably linked. Wounds unhealed disturb both. A Stoic approach calls for clarity of perception and discipline of thought, but also for the cultivation of balance in the body, so that the whole self may live in accord with reason and peace. Healing begins not with complex strategies or external remedies, but with the simplest and most profound act: recognition. To recognize a wound is to allow it to exist in awareness without disguise, without denial, and without the pressure to immediately transform it. This act appears modest, yet it carries immense power, for it dismantles the walls of concealment that sustain suffering. Until recognition occurs, the wound remains hidden, and what is hidden cannot be healed. Recognition is therefore the threshold between unconscious repetition and conscious transformation. Recognition is not a matter of intellectual admission alone. To acknowledge a wound in words is not the same as allowing its full presence in consciousness. True recognition requires an openness of attention, a willingness to feel the reality of what has been carried. It is not about naming the event, but about admitting its weight, its residue, and its influence on the present. In this sense, recognition is less an act of labeling and more an act of seeing. It is the moment when the eyes of awareness turn toward what has long remained in shadow. This turning of awareness is difficult precisely because the wound resists exposure. Pain has a way of hiding itself clothed in silence, distraction, or rationalization. Recognition challenges these defenses, inviting a direct encounter with what the self has sought to avoid. Yet it is this confrontation that dissolves the illusion of distance. The past is no longer denied or concealed. It is admitted into presence. Recognition does not erase the wound, but it opens the possibility of integration by placing the wound within the field of awareness where transformation can begin. The significance of recognition lies in its honesty. Healing cannot proceed from pretense. To pretend that a wound is insignificant is to abandon the possibility of healing. To diminish its impact is to prolong its influence. Recognition requires the courage to admit that something remains unresolved, that it has shaped one's thoughts, emotions, and body. Such honesty is not comfortable, but it is liberating. It replaces the energy of suppression with the energy of clarity. To recognize is to say, "This is here," and in that simple admission lies the seed of release. Recognition is also the act of bringing fragmentation into unity. A wound divides the self part of consciousness, knows the truth, while another part resists it. This division consumes energy, scattering awareness across competing impulses. When recognition occurs, division is reduced. The parts of the self are gathered together in acknowledgement of what is real. This gathering does not resolve the wound, but it establishes coherence, which is the necessary ground for any further step. Without recognition, healing remains impossible, for one cannot heal what one refuses to see. Furthermore, recognition interrupts the cycle of unconscious repetition. As long as a wound remains hidden, it continues to express itself in thought, behavior, and perception without being questioned. Awareness transforms this dynamic. To see the wound is to make its influence visible, and visibility weakens the automatic grip it holds. Recognition breaks the cycle of repetition by shining light on its origin. Once seen, the pattern can no longer operate with the same power, for awareness itself alters its momentum. The act of recognition is not passive, it is a form of responsibility. To recognize a wound is to take ownership of it, not in the sense of blame, but in the sense of stewardship. It is to say, this is part of my inner landscape, and I'm willing to attend to it. Responsibility does not demand immediate solutions. It demands presence. Recognition accepts the fact of the wound without demanding its immediate disappearance. This patience is itself transformative, for it removes the pressure of denial and replaces it with the space of acceptance. It must also be emphasized that recognition is an ongoing practice, not a single event. The wound may reveal itself in layers, each one emerging as awareness deepens. Recognition is therefore not a moment, but a process unfolding as one grows in the capacity to face what is painful. Each recognition brings a new degree of clarity, and with clarity comes a new capacity for release. The process requires gentleness, for to force recognition is to risk re-traumatization. True recognition arises from willingness, not from coercion. Finally, recognition is the foundation of healing because it transforms relationship. Instead of standing in opposition to the wound, one stands in relation to it. The wound ceases to be an enemy and becomes a presence that can be engaged with. This shift in relationship is crucial. Healing cannot come from rejection of the wound, only from acceptance of its reality. Recognition begins this acceptance, opening the way for integration. It is the doorway through which all subsequent steps must pass. In my own journey of thought, I find recognition to be both the simplest and the hardest step. It is simple because it requires nothing more than honesty. It is hard because honesty demands vulnerability. To sit with the truth of an unresolved wound is uncomfortable, yet I have learned that without this step, nothing real can change. For me, recognition feels like a soft but steady light, sometimes dim, sometimes painful, but always the only light that leads forward. The Stoics taught that clarity of perception is the beginning of wisdom. Epictetus insisted that we must see things as they are, not as we wish them to be. Recognition of wounds aligns with this principle. To deny or distort the wound is to live in illusion. To recognize it is to align perception with reality. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to face life directly without evasion. Recognition is precisely this, the refusal to look away. Through this act of seeing, one regains sovereignty over the present. Healing deepens when recognition evolves into acceptance. To recognize a wound is to admit its presence. To accept it is to allow it to be as it is, without resistance, denial, or judgment. Acceptance does not mean approval, nor does it mean surrender to permanence. It is simply the willingness to let emotions exist without attempting to silence or distort them. In this sense, acceptance is not passive resignation, but active openness. It is the decision to face the truth of inner life as it unfolds in real time. Emotions are integral to the human condition. They are neither weaknesses nor flaws, but signals of what has been touched within us. When wounds remain unhealed, emotions associated with them often reappear: sorrow, anger, fear, or longing. To resist these emotions is to deepen their grip, for resistance feeds the very energy one wishes to diminish. Acceptance, on the other hand, interrupts this cycle. By allowing emotions to be felt fully, one creates space for them to move, transform, and ultimately dissolve. The essence of acceptance is neutrality of awareness. To accept an emotion is to observe it without immediately classifying it as good or bad, desirable or undesirable. Such classification tightens attachment. Acceptance loosens it. This neutrality opens a spaciousness within consciousness, where the emotion can arise, unfold, and pass. In this spaciousness, the wound begins to lose its rigidity, for it no longer defines identity. It becomes one experience among many, significant, yet not absolute. What makes acceptance challenging is the natural human impulse to avoid discomfort. Painful emotions feel threatening. They suggest loss of control or vulnerability. Yet the paradox is that avoidance does not eliminate discomfort. It multiplies it. What is resisted becomes persistent, lingering beneath the surface. Acceptance cuts through this persistence by transforming the relationship to emotion. Instead of fighting against what is felt, one aligns with it, allowing it to express itself. In this alignment, the power of the wound to dominate consciousness is reduced. Acceptance also restores authenticity. A life lived in suppression is divided. A life lived in acceptance is whole. To accept emotions is to allow the self to be as it is, without disguise. This wholeness does not erase pain, but it restores integrity. One no longer needs to pretend, either to oneself or to others. The inner landscape becomes coherent, unified by honesty. In this coherence lies strength, for strength is not the absence of emotion, but the capacity to remain present with it. Furthermore, acceptance creates movement where there was once stagnation. Suppressed emotions remain frozen in the psyche. Accepted emotions begin to flow. This flow does not guarantee immediate relief, but it ensures transformation. Energy once bound in resistance is released, allowing awareness to expand. The wound ceases to be an immovable object and becomes part of the living process of growth. Acceptance, therefore, initiates motion from fixation toward freedom, from rigidity toward openness. It is important to recognize that acceptance is not a single event, but a continuous practice. Emotions return sometimes with unexpected intensity. Acceptance must be renewed each time. Each act of acceptance deepens resilience, training the mind and body to meet experience without fear. Over time, this practice cultivates equanimity, a balanced state, where emotions arise and pass without overwhelming the sense of self. This equanimity is not indifference, it is engagement without entanglement. The deeper purpose of acceptance is not merely the easing of pain, but the transformation of relationship to life itself. When one accepts emotions, one accepts impermanence, the truth that all experiences arise and dissolve. The wound is no longer treated as an eternal scar, but as a moment in the unfolding of existence. This perspective brings freedom, for it reminds us that no emotion, however intense, defines the totality of life. Acceptance places each feeling within the vastness of being, where it can be held without fear. The path of acceptance ultimately leads to compassion. When one learns to accept one's own emotions, one also learns to accept the emotions of others. The capacity for empathy grows rooted not in theory, but in lived experience. Pain is no longer seen as a private burden, but as a shared human reality. This recognition softens judgment, replacing it with understanding. Acceptance, then, is not only a gift to oneself, but also a gift to the world. In my reflections, I notice how much energy I once wasted trying to resist my own emotions. Fear of being overtaken by sadness or anger made me tighten inwardly, yet this tightening only amplified the feelings. Over time, I learnt that when I allow emotions to flow freely, they lose their sharpness. They become currents rather than prisons. For me, acceptance is like opening a window in a darkened room. The light does not erase the room, but it makes it breathable, livable, and real again. The Stoics often emphasized mastery over the passions, yet this mastery was not about suppression, but about understanding. Seneca observed that emotions become destructive only when they rule unchecked. Marcus Aurelius counseled himself to remain present with whatever arises, recognizing that emotions, like all things, are subject to change. From a Stoic perspective, acceptance aligns with reason. One does not fight reality, but acknowledges it. By allowing emotions to be seen without being enslaved by them, the Stoic regains freedom, composure, and alignment with the natural order. Forgiveness stands as one of the most misunderstood aspects of healing. It is often mistaken for weakness, for indulgence, or for erasure of harm. Yet forgiveness is none of these. It is not the rewriting of history, nor is it the absolution of responsibility. Forgiveness, in its truest sense, is an inward act of liberation. It is the decision to release the grip of resentment, to free the heart from the constant repetition of pain. It does not excuse what has been done, but it transforms the way the wound lives within. The essence of forgiveness lies in the distinction between memory and attachment. To remember is inevitable. Forgetting is neither possible nor desirable, for memory holds lessons and truth. But attachment to the wound through anger or hatred chains the self to the past. Forgiveness loosens this attachment, allowing memory to remain while its poison is removed. In this sense, forgiveness is not an act toward the one who caused the wound, but toward oneself. It is the reclaiming of freedom from the weight of bitterness. To forgive without forgetting is to walk the delicate line between awareness and release. Forgetting would mean erasing not only the pain, but also the growth that can emerge from it. Remembering keeps the experience alive as wisdom. Forgiveness ensures that the memory does not harden into hatred. Together, they allow the wound to be integrated rather than denied. One acknowledges what happened, refuses to allow it to dominate the present, and carries it forward as insight rather than as burden. Forgiveness also dismantles the cycle of repetition. When resentment is held, it recreates the wound again and again in the mind. Each thought of anger reopens the injury, sustaining its life long after the event has ended. Forgiveness interrupts this cycle. It does not erase the memory, but severs its power to dictate emotional reality. The past remains part of one's story, but it no longer determines the tone of the present. Forgiveness thus transforms the wound from a source of ongoing suffering into a silent teacher. What makes forgiveness difficult is the sense that it betrays justice. To forgive can feel as though one were allowing harm to pass without consequence. Yet justice and forgiveness are not opposites. Justice belongs to the realm of external action. Forgiveness belongs to the realm of inner freedom. One may still seek accountability, boundaries, or change in the outer world, while simultaneously refusing to poison the inner world with bitterness. Forgiveness does not remove the possibility of justice. It removes the necessity of hatred. The refusal to forgive keeps the wound alive. Hatred and resentment act as chains, binding one to the moment of harm. They do not punish the offender so much as they punish the self. The heart tightens, the mind repeats, and the body absorbs the stress of unrelenting anger. Forgiveness, by contrast, relaxes the grip, allowing energy to return to life itself. It is not forgetting, but it is a refusal to let the past dictate every heartbeat. Forgiveness is also not instantaneous. It is often a process unfolding in layers, each one loosening the hold of pain a little more. At first, forgiveness may feel impossible, for anger feels like protection. Yet with time and willingness, forgiveness becomes less about the offender and more about the self. The question shifts from, why should I let them go free, to why should I keep myself imprisoned? This shift marks the turning point when forgiveness is understood not as surrender, but as liberation. Ultimately, forgiveness without forgetting reshapes identity. The self is no longer defined by grievance, but by freedom. Memory is not erased, but it is integrated. Pain is not denied, but it is transmuted. This transmutation is not about excusing harm, but about transcending its grip. The wound becomes a chapter in the story, not the whole narrative. Through forgiveness, one affirms the power to live beyond what has been done. In my reflections, I realized that forgiveness has always felt heavier than it should. For a long time, I confused it with excusing harm. Over time, I discovered that forgiveness is not about them, it is about me. When I allow myself to forgive, I notice the release of tension within. The memory remains, but it no longer dictates my present. For me, forgiveness is not forgetting, it is remembering differently, remembering without chains, remembering in a way that allows me to breathe freely again. The Stoics remind us that holding on to resentment is a failure of perception. Epictetus taught that events themselves are neutral. It is our judgment that makes them destructive. Marcus Aurelius counseled himself not to be harmed twice, once by the event and once by his own bitterness. Forgiveness aligns with this Stoic wisdom. It does not mean erasing memory, but it means refusing to allow judgment to poison the soul. To forgive is to practice reasoned freedom, living in harmony with what is without chains of resentment. Expectation often appears as a subtle extension of desire. The mind projects how things should unfold, how people should act, or how life should accommodate inner needs. When wounds from the past remain unresolved, expectation becomes magnified. It is not only a hope for the future, but also a demand that the future compensate for the pain of the past. This demand binds the heart to disappointment, for reality seldom conforms to the precise shape of our inner projections. To heal, one must learn to release expectation, not by abandoning vision or aspiration, but by loosening the grip that insists on a predetermined outcome. The nature of expectation is inherently dual. On one hand, it reflects the human tendency to imagine and anticipate. On the other, it reflects a resistance to uncertainty. Expectation offers a false sense of control, a way of assuring oneself that the future can be scripted to repair what has been broken. Yet life does not submit to these scripts. The more rigid the expectation, the more inevitable the frustration. The wound is reopened each time reality diverges from what was demanded, prolonging suffering long after the original injury. Releasing expectation does not mean abandoning all intentions or goals. It means cultivating flexibility, recognizing that reality is fluid and cannot be forced into a fixed form. It requires a shift from insistence to openness, from demand to receptivity. When expectation is released, the mind becomes capable of meeting life as it is, rather than as it was imagined to be. This shift frees the self from the repetitive cycle of disappointment and restores the possibility of presence. Expectation also sustains attachment. It ties well-being to conditions outside one's control, making peace dependent on outcomes that may never materialize. The more one expects, the more fragile one's equilibrium becomes. Every unmet expectation is experienced as a wound, reinforcing the belief that healing depends on something external. Releasing expectation severs this dependency. It allows peace to arise from within, independent of circumstance. The self no longer waits for the future to provide what the past withheld, but begins to live freely in the present. Another dimension of expectation is its connection to memory. Unhealed wounds shape what we expect by projecting old narratives onto new moments. If one has known abandonment, one expects betrayal. If one has known neglect, one expects disregard. These expectations create a lens through which reality is filtered, distorting perception before experience has even unfolded. Releasing expectation is therefore not only about letting go of demands on the future, but also about releasing the hold of the past. It is about freeing perception from the weight of memory so that life can be seen freshly. The act of releasing expectation requires humility. It demands an acknowledgement that control is limited, that life exceeds the boundaries of personal desire. This humility is not defeat, but alignment with truth. To release expectation is to recognize that certainty is an illusion and that the openness of uncertainty is where true freedom resides. Instead of clinging to imagined outcomes, one learns to trust in the unfolding of life, however uncertain, however unplanned. This trust is not naive optimism. It is not the belief that everything will always turn out well. Rather, it is the conviction that whatever arises can be met with presence and resilience. By releasing expectation, one cultivates an inner strength that is not dependent on circumstance. The wound no longer dictates what must happen. The self learns to remain whole, regardless of what does happen. This is the essence of healing freedom from the tyranny of unmet demands. In practice, releasing expectation reshapes the inner landscape. The mind grows quieter, less consumed by rehearsing outcomes. The heart grows lighter, less burdened by the need for compensation. Energy once consumed by anticipation is freed for engagement with the present. The wound once fueled by disappointment begins to fade, for disappointment requires expectation as its fuel. Without expectation, the wound cannot sustain itself. What remains is a clarity that sees life directly unfiltered by demands of what must or must not be. Ultimately, releasing expectation is an act of liberation. It is the refusal to chain well-being to the uncertain and uncontrollable. It is the choice to allow reality to be what it is without insisting it repair what has already passed. This release is not indifference. It is freedom. It does not deny desire, but it refuses to let desire harden into demand. In this freedom, healing deepens, for the self is no longer bound by the weight of what has not been given, but open to the fullness of what is. In my reflections, I often notice how expectation silently shapes my own inner life. I realize how easily I tie peace to outcomes, how subtly I demand that the future compensate for past absences. Yet I have also discovered that each time I loosen my grip on expectation, a calm clarity emerges. I feel less pulled by the need for certainty and more grounded in the moment itself. For me, releasing expectation is not about lowering vision, but about lifting the weight of insistence that life conform to my desires. The Stoics consistently warned against attachment to outcomes beyond one's control. Epictetus taught that the essence of freedom lies in distinguishing what is within our power from what is not. Expectation, in Stoic terms, binds us to what is external, leaving us vulnerable to disappointment. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to meet each moment as it arrives without demand. To release expectation is to practice this wisdom, to set intention without clinging to act without attachment, and to let peace arise from inner alignment rather than outer result. Healing deepens when the burden of the past begins to loosen its grip and the mind turns again toward the immediacy of the present. To reconnect with the present is not to reject memory or deny what has been endured. Rather, it is to reawaken the awareness that life is only ever lived here, in this moment, in this breath. The past exists as recollection, the future as anticipation, but the present alone is the ground of reality. To return to it is to rediscover the possibility of wholeness. The nature of disconnection lies in absorption with what is not here. When wounds remain unresolved, consciousness becomes tethered to memory, rehearsing again what has already passed. Alternatively, it may project into the future, constructing endless scenarios of what might or must occur. In both cases, the present is neglected. Life is lived in shadows, either echoes of what is gone or projections of what is not yet. The present, though available, is overlooked, and with its loss comes the loss of vitality. Reconnection requires a reorientation of attention. It is the deliberate act of turning consciousness away from its fixation on past and future and placing it gently in the immediacy of now. This is not an escape from responsibility, nor is it indifference to memory or intention. It is a recognition that healing requires presence, and presence cannot be cultivated in abstraction. The wound may have been formed in the past, but its resolution must occur in the present. Only here can integration be lived. The act of reconnection is profound because it restores proportion. Memory and anticipation have their place, but they are not meant to dominate awareness. When attention is balanced, memory becomes a source of wisdom rather than a prison, and anticipation becomes guidance rather than fear. By returning to the present, one restores this balance, allowing the mind to inhabit time without being consumed by it. The present becomes the anchor that steadies the movement between past and future. To reconnect with the present is also to rediscover the body. The body exists only here, never in recollection or anticipation. Its breath, its rhythms, its sensations all testify to presence. When attention is placed upon them, the mind is gently drawn out of its abstractions into the immediacy of lived experience. This reconnection is not merely conceptual, but embodied. The wound carried as tension or disconnection begins to soften when the body is re-inhabited. Awareness of breath posture and sensation becomes a bridge from fragmentation back to wholeness. Another aspect of reconnection is the restoration of clarity. When the mind is clouded by past or future, perception is distorted. The present is not seen for what it is, but through the filter of what has been or what might be. Reconnecting with the present removes these filters. Reality is encountered directly without the intrusion of projection. This clarity is healing in itself, for it frees the self from illusion and allows life to be lived as it is, rather than as memory or fear dictates. The challenge of reconnection lies in the subtlety of distraction. The mind drifts easily, carried away by thought. Reconnection therefore requires discipline, not harshness, but steady returning. Each time the mind wanders, attention is brought back. Each moment of returning is an act of healing, for it affirms the choice to live here rather than elsewhere. Over time, this discipline becomes natural, and presence becomes less an effort and more a way of being. Reconnection with the present also transforms the relationship to the wound. Instead of being defined by what was endured, the self begins to be defined by what is lived now. The wound is acknowledged but not allowed to consume. It becomes part of the background rather than the center of identity. In this shift, healing occurs. The wound does not vanish, but it no longer dictates the tone of life. Presence becomes stronger than memory, and vitality is restored. Ultimately, to reconnect with the present is to reclaim freedom. The chains of the past and the anxieties of the future lose their power when attention rests fully in now. This freedom is not abstract, but tangible. The freedom to breathe, to act, to feel, to live, without the constant intrusion of what is not here. Healing culminates in this freedom, for it is only in the present that one can truly be whole. In my reflections, I find that reconnection with the present is often both the simplest and the hardest practice. It is simple because the present is always available. It is hard because the mind resists it, preferring the familiar territory of past and future. Yet when I return even briefly, I feel a clarity that nothing else provides. For me, the present is like a quiet ground beneath shifting storms. It may not erase the storm, but it gives me the space to stand steady within it. The Stoics spoke often of the importance of living in the present moment. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that life is only ever this breath, this action, this thought. To be consumed by the past or enslaved by the future was for the Stoics a misuse of the gift of time. Reconnection with the present is deeply Stoic. It aligns with the principle of attending to what is within our control, our perception now, our action now. In this discipline lies tranquility, resilience, and true freedom. The final movement of healing is not merely the easing of pain, nor the quieting of memory, but the transformation of wounds into strength. This transformation does not deny the suffering endured, nor does it glorify pain. Rather, it recognizes that wounds once integrated become sources of resilience, depth, and wisdom. What was once heavy becomes light. What was once constricting becomes expansive. To transform a wound is to allow it to serve not as a chain, but as a foundation. The essence of this transformation lies in perspective. A wound that remains unresolved appears only as limitation, an obstacle against which the self struggles. But once it is faced, accepted, and integrated, it reveals another side. It becomes a teacher imparting truths about impermanence, vulnerability, and endurance. This shift in perspective alters not only the meaning of the wound, but also the identity of the one who carries it. The self is no longer defined by being broken, but by being shaped. Transformation also requires the movement from passivity to agency. When wounds dominate, the self feels at the mercy of memory. Life becomes reactive, dictated by the past. Healing shifts this dynamic. The individual no longer merely endures, but chooses. The wound is not erased, but it is claimed. This claiming is an act of power, the power to decide how the wound will live within. In this act, weakness is transmuted into strength, and victimhood is transmuted into sovereignty. The strength that emerges from wounds is not brute force. It is subtle, steady, and resilient. It is the capacity to remain present in difficulty, to endure, without collapsing, to open without fear. This strength is not born despite the wound, but through it. Without the experience of being pierced, the depth of endurance could not be realized. The wound once healed becomes proof of the self's capacity to survive and to grow. Transformation also deepens empathy. Those who have known wounds intimately often develop a heightened sensitivity to the struggles of others. Pain teaches the language of compassion. What was once isolating becomes connective, bridging the distance between lives. In this way, wounds once healed expand the heart. They do not harden it, but soften it, cultivating a strength that is both firm and gentle. This is the paradox of transformation. From pain emerges both resilience and tenderness. The process of transformation is not sudden. It unfolds gradually as layers of pain are acknowledged, released, and reinterpreted. Each act of recognition, acceptance, and presence contributes to the reshaping of the wound. Slowly, its sharp edges soften and its meaning shifts. With time, the wound becomes less an open injury and more a scar. The scar does not vanish, but it testifies to survival. and survival, when integrated with awareness, becomes strength. The strength that arises from wounds is also a form of wisdom. Pain reveals truth that comfort often conceals. It exposes the impermanence of security, the vulnerability of existence, and the necessity of resilience. To integrate these truths is to live with greater clarity. One no longer expects life to be free of difficulty, but one also no longer fears difficulty. This equanimity is itself a form of power, the ability to move through life with steadiness, regardless of circumstance. Ultimately, to transform wounds into strength is to reclaim authorship of one's story. The wound is no longer a mark of defeat, but a mark of endurance. It is woven into the narrative not as the end, but as a turning point. This reclamation restores dignity. The past is not erased, but it is redefined. The self is not diminished, but expanded. Healing culminates here, not in erasure, but in transformation, where the wound becomes a source of inner strength and a well of wisdom. When I reflect on this transformation, I see how often I once feared my wounds would define me forever. Yet over time, I realized that they were not prisons, but passages. Each pain carried within it a hidden strength waiting to emerge. For me, transformation does not mean celebrating pain, but acknowledging its role in shaping who I am. My strength today does not come from having avoided wounds, but from having walked through them, carrying their lessons as part of my inner foundation. The Stoics often spoke of turning adversity into fuel for virtue. Epictetus taught that difficulties are opportunities to exercise strength of character. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to view obstacles as the material upon which the virtues of courage and resilience are practiced. To transform wounds into strength is to live this Stoic wisdom. It is to recognize that pain is not merely to be endured, but to be transmuted into clarity, resilience, and compassion. In this transformation lies the true essence of freedom and inner sovereignty. Healing is often spoken of as if it were a destination, a final state where all pain is erased and the past has no voice. Yet the deeper truth is that healing is not erasure, but integration, not escape, but embodiment. Its meaning lies not in becoming untouched, but in becoming whole. Healing does not demand that scars vanish. It requires that they cease to dominate. The wound remains as part of the story, but it no longer dictates its direction. To heal is to learn to live fully, even with what has been endured. The essence of healing is reconciliation. It is the reconciliation between past and present, between memory and awareness, between pain and peace. This reconciliation does not deny what happened, nor does it glorify it. Instead, it places the experience within a broader context, acknowledging its reality while refusing to let it define totality. Healing means that the past is honored as truth, but no longer worshipped as destiny. The self is no longer bound by repetition, but released into possibility. At its core, healing is a return to authenticity. Wounds fracture, identity creating division between who one is and who one presents to the world. Suppression, denial, and concealment all perpetuate this division. Healing closes the gap. It allows the self to stand whole without disguise. Pain is not hidden, but acknowledged. Scars are not concealed, but carried with dignity. In this authenticity lies strength, for nothing weighs heavier than pretense, and nothing liberates more than truth. Healing also restores relationship with self, with others, and with life itself. When wounds dominate, they create distance. The self becomes alienated from its own emotions, from genuine connection, from the flow of existence. Healing dissolves this distance. It invites intimacy with oneself, trust with others, and openness to the unfolding of life. It transforms isolation into connection, turning silence into presence. In this sense, healing is not private alone, but relational, extending its effects outward in ripples of compassion and clarity. Another dimension of healing is the restoration of freedom. A wound, when unhealed, acts as a chain. It binds thought, emotion, and action to the past. Healing breaks this chain. The self is no longer compelled by old narratives, but free to choose to act to create anew. This freedom is not abstract. It is lived each moment in the ability to respond rather than to react. Healing grants sovereignty, the capacity to inhabit life as author rather than prisoner. The meaning of healing also lies in its humility. Healing does not promise perfection. It does not create invulnerability or guarantee eternal peace. It acknowledges that life will continue to bring challenge, loss, and change. But healing alters the way these are met. Pain is no longer feared as annihilation, but recognized as part of the human condition. This humility replaces the desperate search for control with a quiet trust in resilience. Healing does not abolish suffering, but it changes its place in the story. In many ways, healing is less about the past and more about presence. The past cannot be undone, but the present can be reclaimed. Healing occurs when the present is no longer overshadowed by memory. It is the restoration of clarity to each breath, the recognition that life is available now. To heal is to return again and again to this immediacy, refusing to let absence eclipse presence. This return may not be final, but it is always possible, and in that possibility lies hope. Ultimately, healing is the transformation of meaning itself. Pain, once felt as chaos, becomes woven into a coherent narrative. What once seemed only destructive becomes a source of depth. Healing does not say, "This should never have happened," but "This has happened, and yet I live." The wound becomes not a negation, but a thread in the larger fabric of existence. This transformation of meaning is the culmination of healing, not a life free of scars, but a life enriched by them. In my own reflections, I find that healing is less about achieving a final state than about learning to live gently with what remains. I used to believe that healing meant forgetting, but now I see it as remembering differently. My wounds do not vanish, but they no longer silence me. They stand as quiet reminders of resilience, teaching me to carry both pain and peace together. For me, the meaning of healing is wholeness, not perfection, but the freedom to live honestly, fully, and without disguise. The Stoics viewed life as a continuous exercise of perception, judgment, and acceptance. Marcus Aurelius wrote that every obstacle can be transformed into fuel for virtue, and Epictetus reminded his students that events themselves are not harmful, but our judgments about them make them so. Healing from a Stoic perspective embodies this truth. It is the discipline of reframing wounds, not as chains, but as opportunities for strength and wisdom. In this reframing, pain becomes part of the path toward tranquility, freedom, and alignment with nature's order. Healing is often misunderstood as a destination, a final state where pain is erased and scars disappear. Yet its true meaning is not erasure, but integration, not escape, but wholeness. To heal is not to return to who one was before the wound, but to become someone deeper and more authentic because of it. At its heart, healing is reconciliation. It reconciles past and present memory and awareness, pain and peace. This reconciliation does not deny what happened, nor glorify it. Instead, it places the wound within a larger story. The past remains, but it no longer dictates the present. One is free to live without being chained to repetition. Healing restores authenticity. Wounds fracture identity, forcing parts of the self into silence. Healing closes that gap, allowing one to stand whole and truthful, carrying scars with dignity rather than shame. In this authenticity lies strength, the strength of honesty, the strength of coherence. Healing also restores freedom. An unhealed wound acts as a chain, binding thought and emotion to what is gone. Healing breaks that chain, not by erasing memory, but by transforming its meaning. The self becomes free to act, to create, and to meet life as it is. Nor is healing about perfection. It is humble. It does not promise invulnerability, but teaches resilience. It shifts. The relationship to suffering pain is no longer feared as annihilation, but recognized as part of being human. This humility replaces the struggle for control with a quiet trust in one's capacity to endure and grow. The deeper meaning of healing is love. To heal is to turn toward oneself with compassion, to extend that compassion outward as empathy. Pain once transformed becomes the ground of connection rather than isolation. Healing is thus both personal and communal, shaping not only the self, but also the lives it touches. Ultimately, healing is presence. The wound belongs to the past, but its healing is only possible here and now. Each breath, each act of acceptance, each moment of release is itself healing. It is not a final achievement, but an ongoing practice of living fully without disguise, without fear. The scars remain, but they are no longer prisons. They are reminders of survival, of transformation, of resilience. Healing is the art of carrying pain without being consumed by it, of living freely in the presence of what once bound. And the quiet question lingers if you allowed yourself to heal not by forgetting, but by transforming. What kind of life might you live?